All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for stopping by for the August 2022 version of the OMARC second Tuesday Zoom presentation. It's been a hot one today, so hope everyone will bear with me. Tonight, we're going to be doing a presentation on 3 methods of antenna launching that I've personally used, and building the Mark II pneumatic launcher that is our go-to when it comes to OMARC events, although that may change in the future. But right now, it's the one we use, and there's good reason. So with that, I'm going to start sharing the PowerPoint here, and then we'll go from there. So here we go. Let me double check everybody can see that. Yes, okay, we've got a thumbs up. All right, so 3 methods of antenna launching and building the Mark II pneumatic antenna launcher. So let's start off with, hopefully this thing will do what it's supposed to do. There we go. All right, so the 3 methods we're going to talk about tonight are the wrist rocket or handheld slingshot, the pneumatic antenna launcher, aka the Mark II, also widely known as a potato gun, and then the arborist slingshot and throw bag, which is a new acquisition for me, and I'm working my way into learning how it operates and how it works, and whether or not I like it. And I've so far been pretty impressed with it. So let's go ahead and continue on. All right, so first method, the wrist rocket, has some advantages. Pretty cheap. You can put one together probably for 25 bucks or so, especially if you've got an old fishing reel hanging around. It's extremely portable, very lightweight and portable, so you can drop it into your go bag if you want to go out doing summits on the air or parks on the air, et cetera, and you want something that'll hang antennas easily and within, something that you can carry along with you, along with your radio gear, et cetera. And then also it's self-contained. It's got pretty much everything you need right on board, and it you don't have to bring along a bunch of other stuff to make it operate, which is nice. Disadvantages of the wrist rocket method: it's got a fairly low power. The range isn't all that great. I'd say comfortably 40 to 50 feet in the air. You can probably stretch it out to 60 feet or so, but you start losing your accuracy at that point. The accuracy is, as with any of these methods, it's the more you use it, the better you get at it. I have found that the accuracy on the wrist rocket can be fairly decent, but you got to use it a lot. It's also kind of touchy. Mine has an issue with I continuously hit the back of the fishing reel with the projectile. I have to remember to hold the system in a certain way, and in order for me to get the projectile launched off properly. And then the last disadvantage really is that it's a very light projectile. We're talking less than an ounce or an ounce, and it runs on a fairly thin piece of monofilament. 10 to 15 weight is 15 weight's probably pushing it. 10 weight is pretty good. Let's see, I've got some pictures of mine. There we go. So this is my setup. I have basically, it's a Crossman slingshot, although it's sold under a bunch of different names. I've installed a small peg through the plastic handle here. It's just a piece of probably 7/16 or 1/2 inch dowel. And then I have my closed back reel or closed spool reel here on the front. And then you can see I've got the 3/4 ounce weight hanging off the front there. not much to it. It's pretty simple. It's easy to work. You'll see I've got a little piece of copper wire hanging here. One of the things I found with using this particular reel is that it tends to, because of the long handle on it, it tends to set itself. So as you fire it off, your hand moves and it sets the reel into the lock position, rotates the handle. So what I've done is I just took a piece of copper wire here, which attaches to the side of the slingshot, and then I wrap it around one of the handles to keep the handle from rotating when I'm firing it. It works great. It really does. I hung a lot of antennas for probably 3 or 4 years with this particular unit. It's seen a bit of the wars. It's been through a lot. Like I said in the beginning, I had to hang an entire field day with this particular wrist rocket back when we were over at Bruce's place in Rosendale, when all the other antenna launchers failed. This little guy got the job done, but luckily there we didn't have a huge amount of height that we had to worry about. I did manage to get this over a 60-foot limb there, and it was pretty much about as far as it was going to go. David's seen this one. This is what I hung his antenna with, and a few other people may have recognized it. Let's see, I've got a few more pictures here. Well, let's go through these parts here. So small enclosed fishing reel. I don't like having the spinning type reel on this particular setup. I find that the spinning reel requires some sort of a guide for the rope, for the monofilament to spool out nicely. These actually tend to do just fine without a guide. As I said, 15-pound monofilament. There's a bit of a balancing act here, especially with this particular setup. You need to balance the weight of the monofilament with the amount of fishing weight that you're shooting into the air. Too much weight on the monofilament, A, it fills up the reel too quick and won't spool out nicely, and B, the weight won't move it out nicely with the power. But if it's too light of a monofilament, then if you get caught up in the tree or you're trying to pull over a rope, you may run out of strength. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. I found the 10 to 15-pound monofilament and a 3/4 to 1 ounce fishing weight works really well in this group, in this setup. And like I said, you can manage 60. If you really tried 65 feet, if you're going fairly straight up, I think you'd be able to manage it. But you'd be really, really inaccurate at that point because you're pulling back for all you're worth. Here's a front view. You can see my little swivel clasp here is all beat up and bent over because it's been through the wars. There's a little more, you can see the copper safety there. Let's see, I think I've got one more picture of it. There's a back view of it, what it looks like from the back. I also found with this particular reel, I had to hold the button down while I'm grasping the grip here. So I take one finger or knuckle and I push down on the button to release the weight and the string, and I sort of hold it there to make sure that it stays unlocked while I'm making the shot. Like I said, it's a bit fidgety, but very effective. Next up, the Mark II pneumatic launcher, which anybody who's been to our events is aware of and has seen a number of times. The advantages: fairly inexpensive. I was doing the math on it today, assuming that you have a few of the bits and pieces hanging around, like a fishing reel, maybe some fishing line. You can be into it for about 75 to 80 bucks in today's prices for PVC. The prices have gone up on, at Home Depot and things like that. So it's gotten a little bit more expensive than it used to be. It used to be about 50 bucks to build this thing. Now it's about 75. It's very powerful, and it has very good range. This particular launcher, because it's air powered, you can very it's good granularity to how much power you're putting into it, given how many psi you pump into the chamber. So usually I start off around 45 psi with the size of this particular launcher, and I'll go over that later. And then incrementally go up from there in about 5 psi adjustments. 45 psi is usually good for about 50, 55 feet. 50 psi is good for 60 to 70 feet. You get up above 55 psi, you start getting into some serious range. It will go very far. I've never pumped mine up over 65 psi, and when I did, it shot way over top of 120-foot trees. Way more power than it ever needed. So it's sort of, I don't know, it's an exponential power to pressure. Once you get past 45 psi, things start going up quickly. So got to be careful with that. Accuracy. This pneumatic launcher is extremely accurate once you get used to where it likes to shoot. It takes, you know, a little bit of work, a little bit of time with it before you get a feel for it. But you can usually put it within I'd say a 1 foot box or 1 foot square without much trouble once you get used to how it works. I've been very successful with hanging many antennas with this, and usually it's within 1 or 2 shots. I can put the antenna rope where I want it. Relatively easy to use. Pump it up, let it go. It's not that big of a deal. Not super touchy in any fashion. You just have to get used to the system, but it's easy to use and it's repeatable. Once you know how much pressure you want, you can get the same type of shot every single time. The projectile for this is a fairly good sized projectile. It's a 3/4 inch PVC pipe, about 2 inches long, with 2 end caps on it. I found that you don't need to add weight to it. I found no increase in range or increase in usability by throwing weight into the projectile. The PVC seems to be just heavy enough and light enough to get out of the barrel real easily. So I have not changed that. I've tried a couple of different ones with different weights in them, adding 1 ounce here, adding 2 ounces here. It never seemed to make any difference. It works just fine with the simple projectile. And we'll see some pictures of it in a little bit. Also, parts are available locally. Everything that you need to build this pneumatic launcher is pretty much in your local big box home improvement store, with the exception of the Schrader valve, the air valve, which you can pick up at most local auto parts store, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. So something breaks, or you want to reconfigure this, or you want to just go build one, you drop, you know, $180 to $100 on parts, and you can have a brand new one within, you know, an afternoon. It's easy to make yourself too, which is nice. It's all home brew. You can change it, you can adjust it, you can you know, add features, take features away, experiment. Lots of flexibility. Some of the disadvantages: it's very large. It's about 5 feet across or long. It's not very portable, although we do carry it around field day quite a bit. But if you were going to throw this in your backpack, you're not throwing it in your backpack. You're carrying it with you, and people are going to be asking questions why you have a giant air-powered device with you as you're going up a summit on the air location. Also requires an air pump of some sort, whether electric, man-powered. It's got to have one to pump it up. And I've found that I actually like running the air pump manually. Some people like doing it with an electric one. It doesn't take a whole lot of work to pump it up to pressure. And if you've been using it long enough, you get good at hitting your mark pretty quickly, so you don't have to pump it up too many times. And it's also loud. The firing off of this thing as the pressure releases through the barrel and the projectile comes out makes a pretty good bang. No, it's not really a bang. It's more of a chuff at really heavy, high velocity. It's got a noise that's sort of unique to it. But if you're in a situation where you're around people that might be asking questions if they hear this thing going off, maybe not the method for you. And we'll show one quick picture here of the pneumatic launcher. We're going to come back to some other pictures of it later, but this gives you an idea. It spans the entire length of my tailgate on my pickup truck and then some. So it's fairly large. And lastly, let's talk about the Arborist Slingshot. This is the newest system that I have acquired to put antennas up. We use this exclusively in the 2022 OMARC Field Day event for putting up our antennas. I've also used it with my friend CJ, K2JLV, for putting up his antenna. It works really pretty well. Still getting used to it. I think if I had to pull out an antenna launcher in a hurry and make sure I hit my mark and my height instantaneously the first time, I would still grab the pneumatic. But I'm getting I'm getting better with this one. And I'm kind of liking how it works. So advantages on the Arborist Slingshot. It's very powerful. It has very good range. Not quite as powerful as the pneumatic slingshot, but pneumatic antenna launcher that has a bit more range. I would say this one's probably tops out around 80 to 90 feet. At least I've never pushed it any further than that, but well, that is something I have to play around with later. It's got a heavy projectile, which is they call it a throw bag. Essentially, it's a canvas bag with a loop on the end, a metal loop, and it's filled with some sort of shot, whether it's lead or steel or whatever. I have two of them. It comes with the ones I bought was a 12-ounce and a 16-ounce throw bag. So they're fairly heavy, 3/4 and a pound. And the rope that it uses is a fairly heavy rope. I would say it's on the order of the thickness of 550 paracord, but it's a lot more slick and more flexible. But it's about the same diameter. It's very accurate. I've been able to hit my mark pretty much with very little practice almost every single time. Maybe 3 or 4 shots when I first started messing around with it. But it is very accurate. It is self-contained, doesn't require any outside influence other than the parts that are on it. So you don't need an air pump or any kind of other power. It works on its own. It also breaks down. It's fairly portable. I wouldn't say soda portable, but it's nice to have. It's a good size to throw in the back of the vehicle. It breaks down into 2 4-foot sections of fiberglass pole, plus the slingshot head, and I have a military box. You'll see a plastic ammo box for the rope and all the other accoutrements. So it breaks down fairly well, and it's easy to move. One other thing that's great about it is it has quick follow-up shots. So say you miss, you spool your rope back into your box, which I'll show you the reason for that in just a little bit, and reset your slingshot, and you're ready to make another shot. As far as the pneumatic antenna launcher, takes a little bit more time to get it back into the fireable position. got to pump it back up. You got to reel the thing back in. Everything has got to be set properly. And then you pump it up and make your shot. This one is fairly quick. I will say one of the other things that's nice about this is the heavy rope and the heavy projectile makes it very nice in case you get tangles in tree branches. With the other two methods with the monofilament, it's a little bit dicey if you get caught up in trees, branches up in the air. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the heavy rope and heavy projectile on this system allows you to sort of pull through some small branches without as much risk of losing your projectile. Disadvantages of this method. It's fairly expensive. This setup cost me about $225 plus or minus. Bought it through Amazon, and I'll show you the list of parts that I bought in the next slide. About $225 roughly is what it cost with shipping and tax, et cetera, et cetera. One of the other disadvantages, the parts are really not available locally. If you need to fix this, or if you need to get a new throw bag or a new rope, probably could find some rope locally that wouldn't be too bad, but the arborist rope is sort of specialized. So you have to kind of pretty much order anything that you need for this, which is a serious disadvantage, but I will say the slingshot system is built fairly robustly, and I have not seen a failure point as yet. The other thing it takes a little bit of getting used to this particular setup. The way they recommend you fire the thing is with the end of it attached to the ground, pushing against the ground, and then you sort of launch it from there. I found that I didn't like that. I found that I wanted a little bit more accuracy, so I actually placed the base of the mast against my hip and fire it that way. And I found that's much more accurate, and I tend to not get the rope all caught up as easily. So I kind of like that system much better. Down on the ground, it works fine. I found that it wasn't very accurate. I needed to have it up the angle a little bit closer to my eye to make it accurate. All right, so these are the items that you have to get for the arborist slingshot if you want to go play that route. And I purchased these from Amazon.com with the exception of the plastic ammo box. This is made by a company called Notch. It's the Big Shot set, which has the slingshot and 2 4-foot poles. The poles are quick disconnect, so they go together real quickly, as well as the slingshot, and they come apart real quickly. I went for the optional trigger system. You can use a trigger, or you can just pull the slingshot down and let it go. I kind of like the trigger. It gives me a little bit more control, actually probably a lot more control. The throw bags and rope were made by a company called Thorium, and the weights and rope set that I got had a 12 and a 16-ounce weight bag, as well as 150 feet of low drag rope. So right there, you've got 150 feet. You can hit 75 feet without a problem, without running out of rope. And you probably could get away with a little bit more if you were able to stop it before it went all the way back down to the ground on the other side, and hook up another piece of rope to it to pull over. And finally, the plastic ammo box was something I picked up at Walmart for $5. It's really smooth and slick on the inside of it, very, very shiny plastic. And it works out great for the storage of the slingshot head and the rope and weights. And it also works great as a rope payout container. One of the things with this system that you have to pay a bit of attention to is how the rope spools out. If you don't have it spooling out well, it'll get all tangled up on you, and you'll lose your shot. I found that if you just sort of pay the rope into the box, you don't have to pay too much attention to it. Just throw it in there as you know, as a continuous rope. I don't know how to describe it properly. You're not throwing it in as a whole pile of rope. You're throwing it in as it goes along, and it tends to pay right out. I've had very good luck with it. It pays right out of it, doesn't tangle, and works really well. So here's some pictures. So this is the setup. You can see the two 4-foot poles here on the back of the truck. The slingshot's up above it. It has it's just the trigger mechanism over here. And you can see the ammo box over here. Let's see here. So here's a close-up of the 12-ounce thorium throw bag here. Nice advantage of this is you can also just throw this up in the air. You can probably hit 25, 30 feet with this if you've got a good arm. I do not throw well, so I don't even bother, but you probably could get away with it. I'm just not accurate that way. And you can see down here on the second picture, there's the 12-ounce bag sitting on top of the pile of rope, which has been paid in singularly. I don't know how to describe how I pay it in, but basically I just take the rope and sort of roll it into the box and just let it go ahead and spool up whatever way. Underneath, if you look real closely, you can see the 16-ounce weight on the bottom here. And what I've done is I've tied that to the other end of the rope. So in case it runs out of rope, it has a little bit of weight on the other side to stop it from taking off and losing the rope. And that's the whole thing assembled. It goes together probably in about 15 seconds, maybe 20. Actually, probably a little bit longer than that. It takes a while getting this trigger put on there. Maybe 30 seconds. Lower mast has a rubber stopper on it, clicks into the upper mast, which then the slingshot clicks into that. Simple ball and detent situation. And then the trigger mechanism here is a clamp-on situation. Let me go. I don't know if I can go back. Not real good with that. But you can adjust how far down on the lower mast it is. And the further down you go, the more you stretch out the slingshot rubbers, and you get more power. I've found it can be a little bit touchy, but once you get it dialed in, it works really well. I found that it's once you figure out the range, then you're in pretty good shape with that. And as I said, this is a bit more expensive, this setup, but much more robust components. And I've come to like it, and I may end up with this being my primary antenna launcher at some point. We'll see. I'm still messing around with it. I gotta put up a bunch more antennas before I decide whether or not I absolutely am gonna switch over from the Mark II. But Mark II is awesome, so you can't go wrong with that. This just happens to be more easy done with one person. There's a close-up of the slingshot head, and you can see just how long these rubbers are. They're probably a good 1.5 feet long in the relaxed position here, and they get stretched out to about 3, well, more than 3. They get stretched out to probably 5 feet. So it's got a lot of power behind it. All right, before we get into this, let's see if there's anybody who has any questions about what we've been talking about so far. Yeah, no, nobody wants to ask any questions. Okay, good enough. All right, so let's talk about the Mark II. That was the meat and potatoes of this presentation. Is going to be, what does it take to build a Mark II? Sip of water here. So these are the basic parts for the Mark II antenna launcher. Both Lowe's and Home Depot sell 24-foot sections of PVC pipe, which saves you from having to buy an entire 8-foot section. And it happens to be a good length for this particular application. You don't have to cut it. So 24 inches of 3-inch pipe, which becomes your pneumatic chamber. 24 inches of 1.25-inch pipe, and 24 inches of 3/4-inch pipe. And I'm going to stop here and say that this is the magic of this whole, the magic sauce for this whole setup. A while back, before I became a ham in my misspent youth, I discovered that 3/4-inch PVC pipe fittings fit incredibly tightly in 1.25-inch PVC. I would say there's probably a 30 thousandths gap total all the way around it, which makes it the perfect size for launching pneumatically. It's just enough space in there so it doesn't drag, and just tight enough so that it really catches the air and goes pretty good. So that's the secret sauce, is the 3/4-inch PVC pipe caps fit perfectly in a 1.25-inch PVC pipe. So in addition, you'll need a 3-inch PVC cap, which is the end, 3-inch to 1.5-inch PVC reducer. This is a bit of a pet peeve of mine because I don't like having a lot of connection points on plumbing when I do it. I try to get as few joints as possible, less chances of failure, less chances of leaking. But I could not find anywhere a 3-inch to 1.25-inch PVC reducer, so we had to add one in there. So 3-inch to 1.5-inch PVC reducer is the main reducer, and then you put in a 1.5 to 1.25-inch PVC bushing, and then you cut 2 inches off of your 1.25 24-inch pipe, and you use that as a connection between the bushing and the 1.25-inch PVC ball valve, and then the other part of the 1.25-inch pipe goes on the other end of the ball valve as your barrel. A little bit of a word on PVC ball valves. Oh, by the way, I'll mention this before I go on. All of these are PVC glue fittings, or what they call slip fittings. They're not screw-in fittings. I don't trust them. The screw-in fittings, I'm fairly sure that under any amount of pressure they're going to leak. So I prefer the PVC glue fittings. Word on the PVC ball valves. Depending on where you buy them from, they can be easier or less easy to open and close. Because this is the trigger mechanism for the Mark II launcher, you want to find a ball valve that is as easy to spin as possible and still be sealed up tight. The one that I have, the picture that you saw earlier, it's a little bit stiff to turn. I would have preferred to have a more loose ball valve, just because it has less of a chance of knocking you off target. I've gotten used to mine, but had I had a looser ball valve, I would have been probably more accurate right from the beginning. PVC end caps. Per projectile, you need 2 for the 3/4-inch PVC per projectile. There are 2 different versions of the end cap, at least between Lowe's and Home Depot. The ones at Home Depot work just fine. The ones at Lowe's are slightly tighter in the 1.25-inch PVC, but they have a little bump on one side that is required that you cut it off or sand it off, just so you get a perfectly round end cap to fit in there. And like I said, that's the magic sauce. You want a good fit. And then additionally, 832 eye bolts with 1 standard and 1 nylock nut for the end of the projectile. That's what you hook your rope or wire or string to. And then a bolt-in tire valve. I prefer the bolt-in version as opposed to the pull-through rubber version, just for longevity. And then optional parts. Small pressure gauge, That comes in real handy when you're pumping the thing up and you don't want to go off of whether or not your pump has a good pressure gauge on it or not. I like having the onboard pressure gauge, although it is something that can be knocked around and get broken off if you're not careful with it. Open spool fishing reel and hose clamps to mount. You can use a fishing reel for your payout of line, but you don't have to. You could come up with another method if you wanted to. I find having the reel on there and the line along the axis of the firing makes it fairly accurate. It spools off nicely and it doesn't drag the projectile one way or the other, or up or down off of the way you're firing it. And last, some 12 gauge solid core PVC covered wire for the wire guides for the fishing line. I'll show you how to make that in a little bit. I just grabbed some out of some chunks of Romex I had hanging around the house, just split it out, and it worked just fine. So a couple of words on assembly. If you are new to gluing PVC pipe together, PVC pipe glue is a two-part process. You can do it as a one-part, but it's much better as a two-part. It has a cleaner slash activator and then the actual glue. A lot of times the cleaner activator is a purple color and the glue is clear. And the way you work putting PVC pipe together is once you get it cut to the size you want, you also want to cut off the edge. So if you're cutting off a piece of PVC, it's going to end up with a rough edge on the square edge. And if you take a little bit of sandpaper and just sort of knock that edge off the outside of your cut, it'll make things go together a lot easier. So what you do is you take the purple activator slash cleaner and you dip it out. It comes on a little metal can with a wire and a little sort of cotton pom-pom at the end of it. And you just run it around the PVC pipe until it starts looking like the PVC is having a little bit of meltiness to it. And you also do that on the inside of the fitting that's going onto the pipe. And then once you've done that, then the next step is you take and you put glue on the PVC pipe and inside the fitting that you're going into. I tend to put a fairly good amount on both surfaces. And then once that is put in there, you immediately want to stick the two together. And as they're being pushed together and the pipe is being pushed into the fitting, you want to turn it at least a quarter of a turn until it just stops turning. That gives the glue a chance to sort of melt the PVC a little bit and join it all together. You don't want to skimp on the PVC glue in this situation because you want it to be completely airtight. So that's just a little word on how to glue PVC pipe, and I'll show you a little bit more of a visual on that once we get back to the Mark II launcher pictures. Making line guides from the wire. This is a fairly simple process, but it's going to be hard for me to describe it. I may save that for a minute and show you once we'll get to that picture. It's a little more visual. The projectiles are pretty simple. They're 3/4 inch PVC end caps with a 2-inch section of 3/4 inch PVC in between. You need to drill out the ends of the end cap. You need to drill out both ends. The first end, what you're drilling out is you're drilling out for the attachment point of the rope or string, which is your 832 ring eye. And the trick with that is you add as we talked about earlier, we were using a regular nut and we were also using a nylock nut or a locking nut. And when you first drill it out, you put the nylock nut on the inside of the projectile cap. and tighten it down until you're happy with it. And then what you do is you snug it up with the regular nut on the outside of the cap. And this will be a little more easy to see once I show you the picture. The reason for drilling out both ends of the end caps, both ends of the projectiles, is because when you glue PVC together, it tends to be a little bit slippery until it sets. So if you were to have the projectile completely sealed up, when you went to push it all together, or like putting on the last cap, you're going to end up with a little bit of air pressure inside of there, and it will occasionally pop the cap back off. So putting a little hole in the back side of the projectile relieves that pressure and also keeps it from over pressurizing or under pressurizing as the temperatures change, but mainly keeps the cap from popping back off if you let go too quickly while you're gluing it. And I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit. And the last sort of assembly note I want to make here is the drilling and tapping the hole for the pressure gauge. Most of these pressure gauges are well pump pressure gauges that I've used in the past. I like the low profile, sort of 1¼ inch diameter pressure gauge with the piece on the connection on the back. Just keeps it a little bit lower profile, keeps it from knocking off of the launcher, which pretty much will ruin the entire launcher at that point. So it's good to have it low profile. When you drill and tap, you probably have to buy a tap for that. Most people don't have an 1/8 inch pipe thread tap. So drilling it to the right size and tapping the hole is a must. It's a tapered thread. So my suggestion is that you don't go crazy tapping it. If you've ever tapped a hole for a bolt or retapped a nut or anything like that, usually with straight threads, you just run it all the way through and the threads are good. With the tapered threads, the more you tap it, the wider the hole gets. And you can over tap the hole to the point where the pressure gauge will not seal. So my suggestion is you tap it a little ways, then try a test fit with the gauge. Make sure it's going to tighten up in there at a reasonable length of thread still sticking out. If you tap it too much, you're going to bottom out on the gauge and it will not seal. So that's the trick and tip for drilling for the pressure gauge and tapping for it. All right, let's see here. So some pictures of the Mark II. This is my Mark II that has been through the wars. I've been using it a very long time, probably 4 years now. You'll see this is the 3-inch end cap. This is the business end of the unit. This is the bolt-in tire valve. I prefer this to the pull-throughs as it is, once it's on there, it's locked on. It comes with bushings, little nylon bushings for 2 different size holes. I don't remember the sizes. It might be 405 and 628 thousandths. I think that's right, but I could be wrong. I chose to put a little bit of silicone in there as well, silicone glue or caulk, just to tighten it up, make sure it was completely leak-proof. And this thing's been beat around. It's been rolling around the back of my truck for years. It gets dropped on the ground, but it has never failed, knock on wood. Here's a picture of the reduction. It's a little bit blurry, but you'll have to bear with me. So the 3-inch chamber comes through here. You have the 3-inch reducer to 1.5 inch pipe. Then this is the bushing from 1.5 inch down to 1.25. You have next the chunk of 1.25 inch PVC that you cut off of your barrel, and then your 1.25 inch ball valve. And then of course, after that, the barrel. In this picture, you can see how I have my fishing reel attached. It's just with a couple of metal band clamps. And then you can see over up on the top side here, you can see my pressure gauge, but I'll show a little bit more of that in a subsequent picture. When you put this together, take and look at it a little bit when it comes to ergonomics. Where is the fishing reel in relation to the valve actuating handle? Where does it sit? Is it comfortable for you to grab, to reach both of them? Also, when we get down to it, you'll see that I've got the pressure gauge in a spot where I can keep an eye on it when I'm firing the thing. So little things like that make it easier to use as you're building it. So a little pre-planning goes a long way. All right, so here's the one of the wire guides. This was just a simple thing I came up with one night just for quick and easy operation. What I've done here is I've taken a chunk of number 12 solid core PVC covered wire out of a piece of Romex. Probably was about 1.5 feet or maybe 2 feet long to start with. And the first thing I did was I wrapped it around a dowel of XYZ size, whatever feels right for you, to make the loop. And then I wrapped in the opposite direction coming off of that loop 2 or 3 turns on the top and the bottom to grab onto the 1.25 inch PVC. And what I did was I turned those on a smaller piece of dowel or PVC or whatever I had hanging around, probably 1 inch PVC, I would guess, to give it a little bit of smaller size diameter to the roll, to the rounds, so that I had to sort of force it open a little bit when I slid it onto the 1.25 inch. And that gives it a little bit of tension on the 1.25 inch to sort of keep it in place. Coming back to it now, I think what I would probably do is I would probably, after putting this into play and getting it where I'm happy with it, and I may still do this, just wrap a couple of wraps of duct tape around it just to hold that in place. Won't be as pretty, but it'll certainly be functional and it won't move. Okay, so here's the projectile. And if you look at this, I've painted these blaze orange just to make them easier to see when they go up into the tree. It's very, very good little upgrade to that. White isn't too bad, but in the wintertime it can be pretty hard, or if it's a cloudy day, these really stand out. Also, the paint acts as a little bit of a lubricant going through the barrel, so that works out great. If you look up here on the top, you can see what I was talking about with the ring eye. This is a, I think, 1 3/8" long ring eye that's got an 8x32 thread. It's threaded down into the cap here. And what I've done is I've tightened the nylock up on the inside to sort of tension it. And then the regular nut is here on the outside. And what that does is it allows me to tighten it up, get it to the length I like, so it's not too far sticking out, etc. And it also secures it. So even if this top end comes loose, this top nut, the nylock will keep the whole thing from falling out. And you can just come back here with a wrench, tighten it back up. And as I was saying before, here's my little air hole for the bottom of the projectile. And basically, all this does is let the air out while you're gluing it together. Like I said, I've had 2 of them pop the back off. Probably also because the glue is outgassing, as well as the activator / cleaner is probably creating a bit of gas, and it just popped right off the back end. And then once it popped off, can't get it back on. You got to make a new one. All right. So I think that's pretty close. Oh yeah, great. Let's stop there. Anybody with any questions on construction? Anybody with any questions on parts, pieces, bits that go into making it? All right, no questions. Okay, like I said, it's all off-the-shelf parts. It's easy to acquire and simple to make, assuming you have used PVC in the past and used the glue system. All right, so operation and safety, and this goes for all methods of putting in your antenna with whatever launching system you decide to use, whether you're throwing a water bottle up into a tree or using a bow and arrow, which is highly not recommended. Know your target and what's behind it. This is a mantra from the sports shooting world. You got to know what you're shooting for, and you got to know what's behind there. Be aware, be situationally aware of what's going on around where you're trying to fire this thing. The pneumatic antenna launcher, well, all three of them, they have a high-speed projectile coming out of them. Granted, it's attached to a little bit of rope or wire or string, but it can certainly put a good welt on somebody. Just be aware of what's around you when you're firing the thing. Definitely take a last look right before you pull the trigger. Most important thing to remember with the pneumatic launcher, the Mark II, always open the bail. Yeah, you only do this once when you forget to release the bail on the fishing reel, and the projectile comes off, pops the line, and just is gone forever. So before you go yanking on that ball valve handle, make sure your bail is open. That way your line will pay out as it's supposed to. Third one here, when in doubt, wait it out, also known as don't yank. Once you get your line up into the tree, there's a lot of things going on around up in there. A little bit of patience goes a very long way and will keep you from getting your projectile caught in the branches. So one of the things that happens a lot is once you get it up into the tree over the branch you want or branch that you don't want, what you'll end up with is the weight hanging off, 2, 3, 4 feet off of that branch and swinging back and forth in about a 3.5, 4 foot arc. And the problem is if you pull your rope back up, you don't want it where it is, so you get impatient and you can start pulling the rope or the fishing line back up. As you pull that rope back up, the arc of this pendulum becomes more violent. It goes faster and faster. And once you get up towards the top of the branch there, it can wrap itself around and get caught. So one of the things that I've learned over the years of doing this is just take a breath and wait. Let the weight, whatever projectile it is, stop swinging a little bit before you get it up on top there. Don't just go yanking to get it back over the top. I still do it now and then, and I curse myself every time. I kick myself in the butt because every time I do it, it gets caught. So just give it a second while it's up there swinging around. Word about the pneumatic launcher and the handheld wrist rocket. Both of them are using 10 to 20 pound monofilament as their primary line going over the tree. In the years we've been doing this with OMARC, we have found that is just not strong enough to run even just 550 paracord over the top of the branch. It's just not strong enough. We have found that a good in-between line is mason's line, or sometimes it's called garden line. It's a nylon line. It's fairly thin, maybe 1/8 inch, probably less. And it's got a good wrap and a very, very slick coating on it because it's a nylon line.
Huh.
It's exceedingly strong. We've used it to hang antennas without going to a bigger line. And it comes in bright colors like blaze orange and yellow and the lime greens. Makes a great intermediary rope. So when you first pull the fishing line back over top, the mason's line is a great second rope before you pull up your final rope. And speaking of final rope, there are a number of different types of rope you can use to hang your antennas, and a lot of it has to do with how long you plan on having your antennas up there and how heavy they are. For us, during field day operations, 550 paracord is sufficient. It's never up in the tree more than 3 days. It's strong enough to lift all of our antennas, which are fairly light, and it's easily sourced, and it's cheap. Comes in 100-foot rolls. If you're doing a more permanent installation, the Dacron antenna line that you can buy is a much better option for long term. Any rope that you put up in the tree, though, I suggest checking on at least once a year. I like to check mine, or my suggestion for checking them is right before winter. You want the most amount of strength in the rope during the winter months when ice is built up and limbs can fall down, et cetera, et cetera. So check your ropes, no matter what type they are, right before winter. Replace as necessary. 550 paracord is not UV resistant. It tends to get hard. It tends to get brittle over the course of a year or two. I have found that after 2 years, it gets real sketchy, so I don't use paracord longer than that. And last thing to talk about, at least on this frame, are branches and what to look for. So when you start looking at the trees and what you've got available, you get a feel for what's going to work for you. Everybody wants to get their antennas up as high as they possibly can, and I understand that. But the higher you go, the more lithe the branches get. They get thinner, they get more flexible, and then they tend to move a lot more, especially in wind. So it's a good compromise if you lose 5 feet of height to gain a real thick branch with a nice big Y in it, rather than going through a real thin branch that's going to move around all over the place and stretch your antenna or possibly break your rope. So something to think about when you're picking out what branches you're going for is how big, how flexible they are, how much they move in the wind. Just go out during a windstorm and just take a look at them and see how much they actually move. I have a big black walnut tree here that I'm going to be putting an antenna into soon, and the branches up on the top of it move a good 6 feet. I'd love to have my antenna all the way up in the top of that thing, but you need a heck of a pulley system and weight system to make up that amount of distance. So I probably will end up with, coming down maybe 5 or 10 feet in the tree just to get a more stable branch. Another thing to pay attention to is the little tiny branches all over the big branches. You got to watch out for those because they're a good way to get tied up when you're pulling your ropes back through. The worst trees to put antennas into, at least to shoot ropes through, are oak trees and certain of the shagbark hickories. They have lots of tiny little branches with little catchy bits on them all over the place, and they can ruin your day as far as launching an antenna rope. So take a look at where you're going for. Keep an eye on the little branches that might be behind it, or maybe even a little bit further off behind it. Antenna launchers tend to, depending on your angle, send that projectile a good 8 or 10 feet past where your branch you're going for. So pay attention to what's behind that branch, and look out for those little tiny branches that like to catch up the projectile as you're coming back over. And again, with those little tiny branches, they are the place where you're going to get caught. So if you're swinging around in the tree, wait it out. Don't yank it through. Just give it a second, let it calm down while it's swinging around up in the tree. And then what I usually do is I'll bring it pretty close to whatever branch I'm trying to get over, and I'll give it a little bit of a pop, and it'll pop itself right over the branch and come back out. That's my little method for getting over there. But if it's swinging around wildly, you just sit there and wait. Otherwise, you will be unhappy. And I think that's it. That's the whole presentation. Anybody got any questions? Anybody got any thoughts?
Dave, is my mic working?
Yep, you're coming right through, Jed.
Oh, there we go. All right, I would suggest with the Dacron rope that you buy from a reputable company. Don't just buy what's cheapest that you can find, because apparently there are many different kinds of that rope, and some of it will break a lot sooner than just, the regular paracord. Because I went all in on the paracord I bought, and that's still up there. The Dacron rope, not so much.
Very good, Jed. Excellent advice. I would say if you're planning on leaving your antenna up for a very long time, probably you should buy it from the Dacron rope from one of the ham radio sources like DX Engineering or Ham Radio Outlet. Probably they're going to have the best quality, I would think.
Yeah, I bought the stuff on the Dacron on eBay. I've actually bought both of them off eBay, but the one was a more of a reputable source, and the Dacron was just, that was garbage. Although it did stuff the mower up real good when I forgot it was there, so it did something.
Yep, the antenna lines, the ropes will make your mower unhappy. I purchased mine online from, I think it's Cobra Ropes, I believe, and that might have been an eBay store. So I have not put many ropes up with it yet, but we'll see how it holds up. I found that the newer paracords are losing their quality. Maybe it's just where I'm getting them from, but they're just not holding up like they used to. All right, any other questions? Any other thoughts?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Judy.
Do you have a preference using these 3 different types of launchers? Do you have a preference?
That's a hard question, Judy. A lot of it has to do with your, where you're trying to shoot the line up. I would say if I were to have to grab one of them, like I said before, if I were to grab one of them to just put up an antenna, my first choice would be the Mark II launcher, the pneumatic launcher. It's a bit bigger, it's a bit more complex, but I know what it does. I know how much to pump up the unit to get the right height. I'm fairly accurate with it. That would be my first grab. But as I said before, different use cases. If you were in a position where you needed to get your antenna up a good long distance, but you had neighbors who don't want to hear the antenna launcher going off. The big slingshot works really well. And if you were to grab, you were going to go on, like, say, a camping trip or something like that, or have something that you would throw in the back of your camper, and you want to throw up, a radio antenna that's, maybe not super high up, the slingshot works great. There's different use cases, but I would say if I had to pick one out of all of them, it would be the Pneumatic Mark II. It just works every single time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions or contemplations? All right, good enough. Then I'm going to end this here. And thank you all for stopping in and taking a look. Hopefully it was informative, and it will be now archived on the OMARC YouTube channel, so that in the future people can take a look at it. Neil, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to preview next month.
Oh, okay, very good.
So next month for September, we have Thomas Witherspoon of swelling.com and qrpeer.com. And Thomas does a lot of industry writing, and he's going to be talking about portable operations. And then in October, we will have Thomas Price, who hopefully is giving us a presentation on VHF and UHF contesting, specifically with the Greylock Expeditionary Force. It's a really cool presentation because their equipment is really interesting. And then the final one, I think, will be November. I don't think we'll do a December one. November is Riley Hollingsworth, who is the head of the volunteer monitors for the ARRL, and he is the formal legal counsel to the ARRL, I believe. So that's the next three. So next month, Tom Witherspoon, you can check out his web pages, and he's definitely worth taking a listen to. So excellent presentation, Dave. Thank you.
All right. Well, hope you enjoyed it. And awesome on the upcoming presentations. We're getting some really good names in there. Sounds really cool. All right. Stopping the recording. Thanks everybody for stopping in tonight.